Let's find a point. Is this real? Or is this just a ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Ride goes up and down, round and round.
Hello? Hello.
Chills, and it's very brightly colored. It's up and down, round and round, and it's very loud.
Alrighty.
Don't worry, don't be afraid, it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Why are we here?
I think we're part of a greater wisdom than we will ever understand. A higher order. Call it what you want. Know what I call it? The big electron. Whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. The big electron. Whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. It doesn't punish, doesn't reward. It doesn't judge at all. It just is, and so are we. For a little while.
Alrighty, folks, welcome to Red Pill Sunday School here on UCY.TV. Thanks so much for joining us today. Special guest today, which we'll get to in a moment, Kurt Kallenbach. Very pleased to have Kurt on. I've wanted to talk to Kurt for a long time, and I've had a chance to speak with him off air. Very, very cool dude. We'll get to that in a moment. I had to. By the way, this is live today. It's January 14th, 2018. I wanted to just make a clarification, something I said last week. We're entering into insane paranoia times right now. A friend of mine, I should say an accomplice in all of this, someone I have worked with for a long time and been friends with a long time, said that I said something last week that I didn't intend to be taken that way. And I said that my dad, while he was in the Army, or he's actually in the Air Force, he was a captain, and he was a navigator, and he flew in both Korea and Vietnam. And I made the mistake of not being clear. I said that my dad worked for the CIA. I didn't actually say that. It was taken out of context. And what I meant to say was that after listening to a Fletcher Prouty interview a long time ago and understanding that all of the operations that the United States did, from its drug running to everything else, all the illicit, illegal operations, where there was never an order, a presidential order, or even a congressional order, of course, because there's no declaration of war, to be over there. What happened is that a lot of officers and a lot of soldiers were hired temporarily or contracted temporarily, kind of like today, except they contract private security. Back then, all they really had was the military. And so many soldiers, many officers, actually, including Oliver North, by the way, were sent over to the CIA temporarily when they went over there to Vietnam and to several places over there that we were not ever technically supposed to be there, and we never did admit that we were actually there, that kind of thing. Just, we have documentary films that are mainstream entertainment films, again, showing the aspect of working for the CIA, literally being hired by the CIA, working for them, and being an agent over there doing all that illegal stuff. However, again, the CIA, being a presidential or executive office, was over there and it contracted a bunch of soldiers and people. I've talked to several people, one of which is a friend of mine. His father understood that his pay was coming from somewhere else. He was working, and he was trapped in one of the worst case scenario where you had the bamboo cage over you in a pit, basically in the middle of the jungle, mosquitoes and everything else, so watching friends die. He's in the worst possible situation. And of course, the military then reports that he's missing in action and presumed dead. So my friend thinks his father is dead. Well, why? Why? They knew he was caught. He knew it. They knew exactly where he was. But you see, absolute plausible deniability. The CIA, they were there in an illegal capacity, so they could not admit that these soldiers were in Vietnam or were in, in Korea. And so that was the same case with my dad. My dad was a navigator, captain, and he was flying those bombing raids over, and this is nothing I'm proud of. I'm telling you the reason I'm telling you this is because I did not mean to imply or start some conspiracy theory. Hey, did you hear Clint Richardson, father, just like Jim Morrison and all those people that got exposed that their fathers were working for the military and the CIA? That's not what I meant to say. It was not my intention. Please don't start saying that Clint's father worked for the CIA or anything like that. No, that is not what I meant. This is not a very, very happy subject for me. I had to attend his funeral knowing this fact because we actually looked at his badges, his medals, his lapel medals, and they're very common, very, very common. This one says worked for the president, for instance, and therefore I knew he was not actually working as in the capacity of the military in any legitimate way. So I'm sitting there at a military ceremony. They wanted to fly jets over it, for God's sake. And my mom was good enough to say no, but I had to sit through the damn 21 gun salute, and I had to go through all this crap, knowing full well that my dad was sick because of the military, because of Agent Orange, because of that he got 100% disability, and I was very active in getting veterans 100% disability because my late step uncle by marriage, was very active in getting veterans 100% disability because of Agent Orange poisoning for being over there when we weren't supposed to be over there and when we were. And, I had to live with this. It caused him so many health problems. I had to, knowing all of this, sitting through that sermon was very painful. It's very painful for me to say I'm not proud of my father's service, nor am I proud of anybody's service, because it's not serving anybody but a corporation, a big slaveholding corporation. So I'm not, this is nothing that I'm proud of. And I'm not revealing any great big secret. If you just listen to Colonel Fletcher Prouty or anyone else that knows anything about that time, or go watch a freaking mainstream movie now, because the statute of limitations is probably up. They can't get in trouble for it anymore. So now it's just going to go mainstream that we've always done things illegally. All right, fine. There's no reveal here is what I'm saying. I get so tired of trying to do the right thing and getting accused of something like this. It's just ridiculous. And when it's from a colleague, when it's from a friend, that makes it even worse. So, and this brings me to my guest, because right now, Kurt, welcome to the show. Thanks for suffering me that little blurb.
Hi, Clint.
Greetings, Curtis Kallenbach. Give him your website right now, so they don't have to search for it in the archives.
I think the best one to go to at this point would be curtisrichardkallenbach.xyz.
.xyz. We'll talk about XYZ and what that means as well. But right now,
wait! I got something fun. That whole diatribe you just went through because of all the grief and pain. Let me put a smile on your face regarding the CIA, if it's even possible. All right,
go for it.
This is a fun fact. Well, it's not really fun. It's incredibly tough to swallow. But the CIA, believe it or not, has its own commonwealth. And believe it or not, the CIA's own private commonwealth is actually called Capitol Hill. It's located on the island of Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands. Has anybody ever heard of the Northern Mariana Islands when it comes to properties of the U.S.? Let me say this again. And I know nobody that you're speaking to right now has ever heard this fact. The CIA has its own commonwealth. That commonwealth is actually called Capitol Hill. And Capitol Hill is located on an island called Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands. If anybody wants to know about private commonwealth properties and things like that, and how the CIA is dealing with foreign or international citizenry, you got to realize that when they say Capitol Hill on the network news, which Capitol Hill are they speaking about? Are they talking about the privately owned Commonwealth known as Capitol Hill? Or are they talking about some other Capitol Hill, maybe located on the continental U.S.? I'm just asking a question at this point. Anyway, sorry about that.
Well, I mean, Commonwealth technically is synonymous with the word republic. So,
this is a private Commonwealth.
to say it has a Commonwealth, is that the same as saying that when you join the Bar Association, you're sort of leaving and going to a different place as well?
Yeah, I'm saying that let's say all of my assets are in one single pool.
Sure.
And everybody that has an interest in that pool is part of that Commonwealth. What I'm getting at is the CIA has its own Commonwealth. And the funny thing is, it is called Capitol Hill.
Right. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and it would be interesting to see where the money comes from, because it's so easy. It's so easy to get money offshore. All you have to do is double bet the stock market. You already know it's going to go up and down. Hey, you're the CIA, or you're the government, and all you have to do is open a dummy corporation, have it purchase or bet against, the stock that is going to rise up and down. And in America, you use taxpayer money. You invest in that, and you lose all the money, but you gain it over here in some foreign corporation. So it's like double insurance, right, or reinsurance. So now all of a sudden you got all this money in a dummy corporation. You simply close the dummy corporation, and you give that money to your Capitol Hill, and none are the wiser.
Right, you drive the value down to zero, but short it in the process, so you got this giant margin of gain.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it's just so wonderful to think that this system is so beautiful in its evil context. I mean, it's so wonderfully put together that it blows your mind. It really does. Bet against the thing, and you purposefully lose it so that money appears somewhere else. That's just brilliant,
Well,
anyway,
sorry about that. I just had to throw that in there because most people don't know anything about that.
Please do, if you got little juicy tidbits like that. That's a great chain. If anybody wants to follow that up, by the way, I always say, do the research yourself to be sure, and then hey, send it to me because I'm so damn busy. Show me all the connect all the dots for me. I wanted to say I just happened to catch a little blurb of Jordan Maxwell. Mixed feelings on Jordan Maxwell, but interesting stuff. He's kind of like me. I think I've maybe prejudged him wrong because he does go into a lot of the Blavatsky and theosophical stuff. But I'm starting to understand, because I do as well, that I'm reading these quotes from these theosophists and stuff, not because I support them or believe they're correct or whatever, but because you can't understand this whole thing unless you look through the eyes of your adversary. You're never going to understand what the adversary is trying to get or do, right? So I'm starting to understand that there's a certain amount of respect and there's a certain amount of disrespect, but you still have to consider all angles in order to understand the whole thing. On that note, I want people to know that my guest today, Kurt Kallenbach, we're all in the same boat. And one of the things Jordan Maxwell said, he said, we're basically this is basically akin to living in an insane asylum, where if you ever go visit a mental hospital, or you ever go even visit a prison or whatever, you got to notice that this lifestyle that you see before you, it looks crazy. There's a bunch of crazy people, right? And somehow they're all living together in some kind of strange harmonious law that keeps them sedated and adhered to in some community that's basically in a little locked up place. Well, I'm going to submit to you what Jordan submitted, which was that, hey, that's kind of what we're experiencing right now. Every time we go outside our front door, every time we have to go to work or go to the grocery store, and everybody that calls me or writes me and tells me how alone you feel, because there's no one you can talk to. You can't talk to your parents. You can't talk to your friends. Or, they think you're crazy. They think you're nuts. Well, it's because you're entering into an asylum and trying to tell, you're entering into a cartoon and trying to tell people, hey, outside this cartoon, there's a reality and it controls you. This is what we all experience, folks. Don't feel like I have any magical power over anybody around me. I have my conspiracy friends and I have my friends that I don't talk to any of this stuff about. I'm little halfway with my parents. I know what their limits are. And we're all in the same boat. Kurt, do you have the same experience? Are all your friends completely up and apart, or do you have to have some semblance of friendships or acquaintances that just would not accept anything you have to say?
After 9 years, the answer is there is nobody. There really is nobody. Nobody that I grew up with would want to listen to this stuff. So what I would call friends now are the guys or gals that see it for themselves. So I don't have to ever speak about it. So we can talk about anything else but this now because they already know it's true. But I quit a couple of years ago, which was one of the better things I've done in my life. I quit talking about it, trying to explain it, because that's hell. That's pure hell. So now there's nobody left that I would talk to about this. I don't really have any interest. There's an old sales pitch where it says, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. I don't want to try to convince anybody. And here's the thing. As much as I may or may not know about what I know about, I could not convince even me of this stuff. So if I met me, from 10 years ago, knowing what I know right now, and tried to even convince the very man that knows it, I couldn't do it because it's an impossible. It's so far fetched that you need a starting point. My starting point, like most people, it was the patriot movement, the idea of patriotism and voting and all that stuff. It's not there. What I learned over 9 years is this truly is property. This is only about property and about interest in such property, and that property does include your life. So anyway. No, the answer is no. There's nobody there. I don't have any friends from. Don't get me wrong. I still have, and I've always been very, very protective of my friendships. But I only have a couple friends anyway from grade school, junior high, high school. I don't drag those people around with me. We are friends because we give each other that much latitude. So yeah, there's a couple guys that we don't talk about this stuff, but they're still friends, and they're friends in what we know to be friends. But the folks I've met over the years. In this, this correct.
How about the percentage of those that are online friends?
What does that mean?
How many people do you actually have? How many people do you actually have around you that you see every day or every week or whatever? And how many of those are just people like myself that you met not a few weeks ago and are digital friends?
Yeah, I have one guy that has been with me on the whole journey, Kyle, and then everybody else would be these digital friends that have learned.
There you go. So folks,
everybody.
I would say that I have been maybe 2 or 3 people that I see on a regular basis, which could mean once a month, that around here. And that's it. That is it, folks. We're all in the same boat. We all feel alone. When I lived in New York City and I lived in the middle of that city, I felt alone. Every time I walked out and it was among all those people, I felt alone. There is no other way to say this, but we're all in the same boat. We're trapped behind these computer screens. We're looking for something that we're never going to find unless we get up off our asses and start building something together. And this is my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to do just that. Find some way, some piece of land, some sanctuary, some monastery, whatever it takes to get people to get off their asses, stop trying to convince people who have no ears to hear and eyes to see, and get together. We're out there. We all know where each other are, whatever that is, and yet we're all still saying we all feel so alone. And we're going to continue to feel alone because that is what this system is designed to do. It is not designed to get us together. It is designed to keep us separate. Even though it seems like for those who participate in Facebook, good on you. I never had one. But you might have 500, 1,000 friends, but none of those people are your friends. None of those people are real. You're talking to something that just isn't real until you actually get together and you make something of your friendship. These things are not real, and I say that only in the context that it's designed to keep you apart, not to get you together. That is what this technology has done. It has the illusion, the delusion that we're getting together, but in fact, it's drawing us farther and farther apart.
Well, even between you and I, let's say, but I mean, we're closer together. But I'm talking about they divide to conquer, not just one man to another, but even the man within himself. I mean, this whole idea is that the concept of in the world but not of the world. Right. Yeah, I mean, in the world means that I'm sitting around the board playing Monopoly. Of the world is actually a piece built and designed specifically for, let's say, Monopoly. That of the world would be the wheelbarrow, whereas in the world is me playing through the wheelbarrow. It's still a division. It's still a division. I mean, I have to know the difference between me and the wheelbarrow. If all of a sudden Curtis Richard Kallenbach, all caps, if I'm starting to play as if I am that, I'm in trouble because then I'm going to go. Yeah, the wheelbarrow goes to jail. The player never does.
Sure. You have to bail your shirty out, right? Yeah, but see, I'm the shoe, and I'm right behind you, always rolling the dice, trying to get ahead of you, trying to land on the good spots. Right? I'm always there to kick you in the butt and compete with you because that's what the rules tell me I've got to do. That's what the rules of the chessboard, the rules of the Monopoly board. That's what the rules of every game say to do. It says to compete, and yet. Does the law of nature say compete? Nope. Not one concept at all. There's nothing that says compete. It says be charitable. It says make sure everyone else is wealthy before you are. It says everything is opposite in the scriptural or natural or whatever law you want to call it. I don't give a crap what name you put on it at this point. It's self-evident. It's so again, not only are we on this Monopoly board, but we're also completely in competition with everybody else on the Monopoly board, and that's the worst part of it to me. Is that it's like a board game. It's like it's a competition, and it's a competition that is absolutely 100% entertainment. It is not necessary. It does not need to happen. We do it because we think it's normal.
It fills a hole.
A big hole.
Yeah, it fills the hole. I mean, if we have a hole, it fills the hole. We're always looking for something to fill what's missing in our life. And it doesn't matter what type of competition it is, whether it's, going to the gym and trying to get healthier. See, one thing I've done at 57 years old, it took me years to get here, by the way, is I'm not competing with, and by the way, I've never competed with anybody. I've never been a good competitor. I was All-American in track, but I still was not a good competitor because the only one I was running against always was me. I didn't care who else was on the track. They were never my competition because my whole thing was to be better for myself. I did not care what other people thought about my performance. It was always just me. So I've never been a good competitor. That's why I'm not very aggressive in court or anything like that because I don't feel like I'm competing with anybody. I'm looking for truth. That's the problem. Yeah. And to me, the truth shall set me free regardless of what you say. So I don't need to compete with anybody. All I'm looking for is the truth. So that's been my whole thing, my whole journey. But I was misled early too. I did go down the many wrong paths.
Yeah, and one of the things that really bothers me about a lot of writers, a lot of hosts out there is that they don't. We made this prediction in 2000. This is going to happen. Nope, didn't happen. Oh well, that's because the Illuminati they were winning, and so they're going to change their date, right? So and these guys they never retract. That's what bothers me. They never retract, even when you can prove that they're wrong about something. You show them the evidence, they're never going to retract because that would mean they'd have to change their book or amend it or just admit they're wrong. And I find the opposite to be true. I find being wrong to be the most enlightening thing possible because it makes me look for the right answer. So there's this problem too, and like you say, it doesn't matter what you say or I say. The truth will set me free, no matter what I say or whatever anybody else says, because that's the only true. That's the only place freedom exists.
And the sad thing about it is, and this is where a lot of people scares people. when somebody says or asks me, well, how do you know when you arrived at the truth? See, this is a very difficult thing because when you get there, when you arrive at the truth, they're not going to bother you. In other words, nothing's going to happen. And I mean, absolutely nothing's going to happen. Nobody's going to come after you. The IRS isn't going to send you letters. Nothing's going to happen. They're not going to say you made it. Nothing is going to happen. So when you finally make it to where you want to get to, you're not going to really know it because they're not going to acknowledge it.
Well, you're going to realize. You mean suddenly I'm private. So in other words, I'm alone. I'm no longer part of that or that. I'm just here. I'm just what I always was without any, extraneous
additional
stuff.
Burdens. Without any additional burden.
There's no excitement there. There's no. It's like a anticlimactic, right? Is what you're saying?
If all of the burdens in my life are ones that I've somehow chosen for myself.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I start to recognize those burdens, and all I do is start to unload them. Basically undress and removes all those characters that I've been carrying. And all of a sudden now I'm not subjected to any of the rules or laws of those characters. Eventually I get down to basically just being myself, and there's no laws but the laws, of nature. And that's the funny thing about it is we don't realize it, but it's the characters we're carrying, which are the burdens that we feel. We feel the burdens through different law, statutes, codes, and whatever, positive laws. But it's only because we choose to wear the character and we choose to do it voluntarily. When we eliminate the voluntary aspect of our time, because remember that's ultimately what the commodity is. That's Father Time or Kronos is ruling this world. We don't know it. We're even so far lost that there's even people that think they're really, really close to it by saying, this is just like the Matrix. They got our energy. Bull. And I mean bullshit. Here's the deal. When I go out into my backyard with a shovel with the intent to dig a hole, I'm doing it real time. I go out to my shed, pick up a shovel, and I go to the backyard where I want the hole dug, or where I want to manifest or create the hole. I start digging, and eventually, over time, the hole, it exists. It comes into existence. I manifest the hole. Now, did I do it through my energy? No. I did, because energy is nothing but potential. I can only do it by applying the energy over time. If I don't have time in the equation, the potential energy is irrelevant. So the hole never gets dug if I don't apply time. Time is the only thing we should be claiming as far as equity. Because whether it's time in body, time in character, time here, time there, time as a defendant, time as a taxpayer, as long as we don't choose to volunteer our time, we should be getting paid for it. And believe me, the moment you start asking for payment for your time is the moment they stop bothering you.
Well, and of course the whole system is built without time. Their system without tracked, recorded time. Everything begins with a time and ends with a time, right? You couldn't get me to pay a traffic ticket if you didn't put a time for me to pay it on there. I'll just wait till I'm dead, right? So everything's based on time. But you're saying the second that you acknowledge that and you say without time you have nothing. So I'm going to give you my time, but I'm going to have you pay for it.
Well, I'm not. And here's that's one commodity though that Clint, you and I can never argue. See, we may. If we're new agers and stuff, and we throw the word Gaia around like Mother Earth, then realistically, my molecular structure, the physical body, down to my DNA, that may or may not be the substance of Mother Earth. So my physical existence may be from the soil, so to speak. And so now there's going to be a lot of people that say, yeah, but Kurt, we all share the earth. So in essence, your little plot of land, your little piece of ground called body, it's part of all of us. Okay, I'll give you that. But there's one thing that nobody can claim. It's the spirit in that land, the spirit in that ground. That is I. That is me and my own. So the thing is that the spirit, while it inhabits that little piece of ground, that spirit is private and it's mine. And nobody gets to make a claim upon that time and body. So that's my point, is that remember that I exist prior to my body and I will exist after my body. And so even if that period of time where my physical existence is claimed by all, nobody can claim my time.
Well, and see, the very fault in this is that time is a word. So whatever time you may say time represents, time is a word. And if you own the word, then you own what it represents as long as there's agreement and consent, right? So,
no, it could be
this
occupation, though. Remember that mentally, you can spend time anywhere. I mean, when I go and go watch a movie in a theater, and I sit my butt down in that chair, well, when that movie begins, am I in the theater or am I in the story? See, the thing is that physically I might be in the sitting in the theater, but mentally my mind is occupied. I'm in that story. So realistically, that's a form of time travel. It's sort of an out of body experience. Because I'm. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm in the popcorn tub as well. But you're right,
Yeah,
and that's the beauty of being able to. You said earlier you're off the phone. You're a science fiction fan, movie fan, and that's the beauty of being able to actually lose yourself in the movies. Some people lose themselves a little too much and become hypnotized and become lost in the story so much that it affects their lives in ways that are almost incomprehensible, that are hypnotically induced with all the lights and everything. But for someone that can who's aware that that each movie has a certain amount of flashes at a certain amount of time that's designed to hypnotize you, put you in a trance, give you a message, give you that new age rah-rah, make you multicultural, make you this, make you that. There's a certain aspect of that you can filter out once you get to this sort of mastery of these subjects, and you can actually watch these things as for what they're intended. It used to be that science fiction was something that would think of the possibilities of the future. Now science fiction has become more predictive programming. This is what's going to happen. You're fucked, basically. You're screwed. Here's how it's going to happen, and maybe give you a little hope along the way. But in any case, you're able to not lose yourself so completely, and you're able to actually see the design behind these fictional representations. And you mentioned Roger Rabbit as a good example.
Yeah, well, that was a tough one for me because I saw it years ago when it came out, and I wasn't where I'm at today. But the concept of a living man interfacing or even speaking to a cartoon, well, I guess that's kind of where we're at now, because that certificated person or that fictionalized individual that they create for our use in commerce, let's say, that's no less a fiction than Bugs Bunny or Roger Rabbit. And so here we start to think or believe we are that character, and all of a sudden we become the cartoon. There's a really interesting movie that most people don't know about. Anybody that's followed my garbage over the years has heard about it, but it's called Phantom Tollbooth. The Phantom Tollbooth came out in 1969, and it had the kid that played in the Munsters, the little boy, and he was the star of this movie. Now, what's interesting is that he was on the telephone with a buddy of his, and all of a sudden there was a flash in his bedroom, and he went and walked in the bedroom, and there was a giant gift box, and it just happened to appear magically, and he saw the card, and he pulled on this thing, and the box opened up, and there was a toll booth right in the middle of his room with a little car that he could fit into. But it's interesting because he got in this car, and it's only about 10 feet from the toll booth itself. The car goes forward. He gets up to the toll. He reaches into the cigarette ashtray, and there were some pieces of silver. I'm not kidding. He takes the pieces of silver, throws them into the toll booth, and he moves through the toll booth. And as soon as he got on the other side of the toll booth, he was a cartoon. And the whole story begins there, and he goes into cartoon land. So the point is that think about this idea of a doorway or a toll booth, where we're in 1 minute where it's reality, but the moment we decide to go into commerce, to go into one of these jurisdictions, it's a fiction. And we can only be in it as a fiction. So the moment we realize it's in the world but not of the world, that we can be in there, but we can only be in there through or vicariously through a character that fits into that jurisdiction or that world. We can never go into that world. We can never go into that courtroom and be heard, because a living man can't be heard in that realm or in that fiction. We can only be heard through a conduit or through a representation, or a better word, the best word I can think of today is surrogate. So,
an idol.
I mean, we
an
need to,
idol.
Well, that's what they would. That's the oldest term, an idol that they recognize in their world that maybe has value to them. But the reality is I can't be heard. I need something to represent my position or my voice that can be heard in that fictitious land. But people need to go find it. You can find it online, but it's called The Phantom Toll Booth, and it's really fun to watch because the guy that drew up and the voices of what's his name from Bugs Bunny, they're the ones that put the cartoon together. But that's an amazing movie because the kid's about 13 years old, and if you've been around this long enough, you realize there are some very pivotal years like 5, 7, and 13. Those are very pivotal. 5, 8, 7, or 8, somewhere in there, and 13. Because at 13 years old, we're supposed to be, for the male, becoming men, and there's supposed to be a transference going on there. But if we get stuck or lost at 13 years old, we end up someplace else, and chances are we'll never get out. Chances are we'll believe we're in that realm or in that world forever, and we'll die in there. But anyway.
Yeah, well, and technology is, of course, getting us to that point by offering us a virtual, visual, contextual sort of world that we can exploit things in. And that's one of the most amazing things is when you start looking up the terms that are within that realm, right? You have lands that you can buy. I mean, remember, this is the same thing as saying legal. The legal language is completely fictional. It never refers to anything that is real, only a representation, a title, a name, a person, place, or thing, right? But never the actual substance, only the form, only the, like you say, you're the idol, right? But it's never real. And it what the hell was I just going to say? Damn it!
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that concept of real quick because in the Christmas cartoon, A Charlie Brown Christmas, it's really funny because there's two unbelievable little lines in there. People should look at the screenplay, but there's a line when Charlie's little sister, when Charlie says, "Well, what is it that you want for Christmas?" And she says, "Real estate." So here's a cartoon that's actually saying, I want real estate. So, I mean, it's pretty... By the way, how many people have ever noticed that in Charlie Brown's the only one with a legal name? Everybody else has just a Christian name. And he gets his ass kicked all the time because he's got a legal name. Anyway.
Well, I'll tell you, you basically, what is happening right now is that, in my opinion... The legal system, the legal realm, and what you might call the legal god, if you will, the personification or the anthropomorphization of it is happening. And what's happening is that is turning into this artificial intelligence we keep hearing about. It's turning into the Internet of Things. It's actually getting a virtual appearance, something we've never been able to see before. And what you find is that when you look at all of the codes, all of the laws that are being developed inside of that system, they expressions like IRL, which is in real life in the real world in contrast to life on the internet. Then they have the digital world, electric spectrum of data, creating, storing, retrieving, and synchronizing. They have digital identity, an online footprint left by the user, i.e. the agent, available across the World Wide Web. Are you leaving a footprint in the digital world? No. Are you leaving a footprint in the legal world? No. Only in the real world can you actually leave a true footprint, right? Something that compresses and leaves a footprint, right? Or whatever. But these are all, they mirror each other, the legal version and the digital version. This is why they're pushing for everyone to have a digital identity. I get this now. The digital footprint, which is the form of the user in form of data in the process of information, right? All of these are the same exact thing as the legal language. And so what's happening is that we are being thrust into a digital version of the legal system that's been going on for so many centuries. We're literally becoming that avatar you were talking about on the Monopoly board, but it's digital. So I don't actually have to reach and move. I don't have to roll the dice. The dice are going to be rolled for me. We're literally, the beast is becoming a virtual thing right in front of our eyes, and all the rules are the same. The legal thing is becoming, it's coming into existence as a I don't know how to say it. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're finally seeing the legal system come to life in the form of a virtual artificial intelligence, and we're all going to be buying land, virtual space, and virtual advertising, virtual products, virtual coins, all to feed the AI, all to further the means and the ends of the legal system, which is now the artificial intelligence. Wow.
That reminds me, Clint, earlier today I was in Target, and I came home and I realized I had lost my virtual wallet.
Oh.
I'm going to have to go back there and see if I could find it anywhere. You know where I probably lost it, but I didn't physically go to Target. I went to Target online, so maybe that's where I lost my virtual wallet. See, people don't realize how stupid that sounds, but anytime, and I don't mean any disrespect for anybody, but here, you got so many people out there that are screaming and hollering for their rights, and yet they're the first ones out there that can't wait to get involved with Bitcoin, a virtual coin system or form of payment, and they're saying, no, man, I have all the rights. Listen, but they're out there touting, and I don't care who's doing it. I'm just saying you really can't have it both ways. If you think you can, you better know the difference, and you better protect yourself, because again, what they do is they hang these carrots out in front of everybody because everybody chases the bright, shiny, spinny things, and then they realize they get hooked because they're making all this money. It's all virtual money, and it doesn't really exist. And they didn't earn anything, and they didn't have to physically put out any energy to get it. So realistically, it is nothing from nothing equals nothing. And so I struggle with all the people screaming and hollering for reality rights when they're the first ones on the bandwagon of virtual monies. You know what I mean? I'm sickened by it. But anyway,
it's horrible. It's horrible. No, I know exactly what you mean, man. And I look at it with contempt, and people can never figure out why I showed so contempt. I could have got in on the Bitcoin rush when it was $40 an ounce or whatever, and I'd probably be a millionaire. If I wanted to participate in evil, I could have gone into the stock market when I was studying that and how government invests. I could have, but that's not my goal. My goal is to get away from that shit. Money is the biggest burden you'll ever. You know, it's a bunch of IOUs. I know nobody wealthy that's happy. No one that's content. No one that is truly enlightened or helped by their money. Yeah, they get things, but that's just not where it's at. So what I'm noticing here, especially, is, again, the word agency is now turning into the word user, right? Because you're the user of your program, kind of like in Tron. Right, so the man is the agent for the character in the computer, the program, and then you've got the master computer, which is the principal. And so everything you do in the computer realm is a third party engagement through agency, with you being the user or the agent, and the program being, you know, your little avatar, your little character being digitally represented as you. And everything he does is with a third party, because all that space in that computer, all that land, virtual land, is owned by someone else.
And that's what's funny, because when my father's sperm fertilized my mother's ovum, generating or creating a new unique land, which is my DNA, that right there was mine to occupy. Meaning, when I say mine, I mean I. So I occupy what my mother and father created. That's my property. What's really funny is that as soon as I came out of my mother's womb, though, there was a character born on a form in a very specific order, and that character was named Curtis Richard Kallenbach. And that character was not me, and it also wasn't my father's. So as soon as I started wearing that character through a belief system that it was my birth certificate or certificate of live birth, I now started occupying a space that was generated by some other creator. So I was given the space of my DNA and physical body by my mom and dad. But this other space, this virtual space called Curtis Richard Kallenbach through a certificate of live birth, that character is owned by an author. And what's interesting is the concept, and many people have heard me say this before, but let me do it. Well, I don't know, I mean, how many of your folks have ever heard me before, but let me go to Black's real quick and read literary property, because the literary property is so huge.
Before you do that, you said something about Black's dictionary that caught my eye. It was something about not being for the definitions, or for being the definitions of words more so than the court cases themselves.
Black's Law was, the first issue came out in 1891. The Black's Law itself is a language in and of itself. It's not a dictionary like Ballantyne's or anything. It's not a law dictionary. It's a language dictionary that only works within a specific jurisdiction. In other words, if I went into a small community somewhere, I was a carny. I got into, no offense to anybody if you have any carnies listening, but I mean, if I was a carny and I learned that carny language, zip, 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 whatever they do, that's a very specific language only to carnies. And Black's Law is a language only specific, very specific, to a legal system. It is not a law dictionary. It's a language dictionary for a specific jurisdiction. And that's what it is. It's a term of art, or a book of terms of art. And it's different. So when an attorney says to me, well, that's not a law dictionary, of course it's not, but it's the one you guys use. So, I mean, remember, 99% of the truth is still a lie by omission by 1%. So to me, the Black's Law, I use it because that's the language that's being used against us. It's not because I consider it a law dictionary. It's because it's the language they're using. I might as well learn the language. I mean, I'll never learn the carny language, but I certainly can learn the language that they're using in the courtroom.
And that you're expected to use when you're in agency, when you're in a courtroom.
If I'm wearing that character,
exactly.
If I volunteer to wear that character, then I better damn well know the language.
Well, and the same thing with a cartoon. Of course, it just happens to be that cartoons speak English. Well, thank God for that, right? Wasn't designed that way or anything. Woo! Oh boy! Imagine if cartoons had their own language, we'd have a worthless media on our hands, wouldn't we?
I think people should look into the etymology of the word cartoon and see where that takes them, because they're going to be surprised about vehicles and things like that. But let me get into literary property real quick, because I'm now really stuck on the concept of time and character. And again, J.K. Rowling, the creator of Harry Potter, has all the authority over every character in the world she created. I mean, she is no less a god to that Hogwarts or whatever world she created. And every character in there is born of her hand. She owns all the rights to all those characters. So none of those characters get to speak freely or outside of her rule book. If I went out of the house every day dressed like Harry Potter, I'd look like a 57-year-old idiot. But nevertheless, J.K. Rowling would have a right or a claim upon me because I'm physically representing or presenting her character without her authority. So she could bring me into a courtroom and say, listen, all the time you spent in my character, you owe me, some percentage of your day.
So she could say at Halloween time, she could say, how dare you, all you parents who allowed your children to dress up like Harry Potter. Harry Potter is diabetic. He can't have sugar. You've defamed the Harry Potter name. Harry Potter is not an addict to sugar like all your children's are. Right? I mean, that's how ridiculous.
In essence, saying, if your kids are going to wear my Harry Potter uniform or character, they can't eat the candy they go and get, because my character is a diabetic. So he could bring all the children. That's the idea of this birth certificated person. That person has its own set of rules, and it falls within a jurisdiction of its creator. Let me read literary property real fast, because this is important for people to understand that, again, this is one of my favorite ways to explain things to people. Not that I'm the best at it, but I try. I try to take very difficult ideas and distill it down into something very simple. At night, when I lay my head on the pillow, when I lay my head on the pillow, whose head is on the pillow? Do I say, well, Kurt's going to sleep now? Of course I don't. I am going to sleep now, and I don't have a name. But when I wake up in the morning, what people don't realize is that the very first character I put on is Kurt. I mean, if I get up and take a piss early in the morning, and when I look in the mirror, I actually see but I recognize that reflection as Kurt. I don't say Kurt, but I recognize that because that's what other people would say. Hey, there's Kurt. So Kurt is the very first character I put on in the morning. When I look to my left and I see my wife laying there, then I put on husband. And when the phone rings and it's Clint, and I pick it up and recognize that it's Clint, I put on friend. And then when my wife's done packaging up stuff for our eBay Amazon business, I put on driver. And then when my son calls, I put on dad. And when my dad calls, I put on son. So, by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm wearing Kurt, husband, driver, son, or friend, son, father. And then, of course, if I get a letter in the mail and it happens to say defendant, I can choose to put on defendant at that point in time if I choose to show up in that courtroom. Or if I get something from the IRS that is claiming me to be a taxpayer, I can choose to wear taxpayer voluntarily, or I can figure out a way to get paid as a taxpayer. My point is that all these different characters have owners. And there's not a single one I don't get paid for, just so you know. There's nothing in my life I do for free. I mean, even when I do something for my grandkids, I get a smile back in return. So there's reciprocity in every single thing we do. We don't recognize it as such. Oh, I would do that for nothing. No, you did it for the smile. You did it for the feeling you got in your heart. You always get something, because if you don't get something in return, it will be extinguished. If there's no emotional tie to something, you won't do it. Again, if there's no motive to do it, you won't do it. It's all motive. Everything is motive. So let's get back to the literary property. The literary property is actually something wearing the creation of an author. So here's what it says in blacks on page 841. It says, literary property may be described as the right which entitles an author and his assigns to all the use and profit of his composition, to which no independent right is, through any act or omission on his or their part, vested in another person. In other words, J.K. Rowling can never vest me with any of her characters. I can never be vested with Harry Potter. I can never be vested with any of her characters. I can be assigned it to use. This is an occupation or a use now, but I can't be vested in it. It goes on to say, literary property is the exclusive right of owner to possess, use, and dispose of intellectual productions. So when they want to kill off Curtis Richard Kallenbach, they can kill Curtis Richard Kallenbach anytime they want. Can they kill me? Well, here we go. It says, to use and dispose of intellectual productions, the term denotes the corporal property in which an intellectual production is embodied. Wait a minute here. If I'm wearing the clothing of Harry Potter, does J.K. Rowling have the right to the man under the clothes? Yes, she does. Until I strip myself of those clothes, I'm still making a claim upon her character. And as long as I'm wearing that clothing, J.K. Rowling has a claim on my life.
Okay, but let's make it clear to the audience now. You're talking about something that you can picture. I have a Harry Potter cloak and or the big hat or whatever. I have the wand. These are things that you can picture in my mind, but what you're really talking about are things that are not. It's very difficult to picture. It's very difficult to picture status. It's very difficult to picture that I'm a Mr. or this or a job or a title or anything else. These are things that are not seen in any way.
Or a character born to a timeline, Anno Domini Gregorian, that is owned or claimed by the Roman Catholic Church. Again, Curtis Richard Kallenbach is a character born to a timeline that is claimed by or with this story frame, the greatest story ever told, of the Roman Catholic Church. And so when I wear those clothes, or I clothe myself with that character, which happens to be called a juristic personality, when I wear those clothes, that juristic personality is subject to, it's actually considered the Roman Catholic Church. It is actually a brick in the wall of the church itself. So juristic personality is the Roman Catholic Church. So as long as
it's
it
defined
is the
that
church,
way, right? I mean,
it is defined that way.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, when people realize that this is all a property claim, and until you realize that you may be trespassing, or worse, you may just be occupying the vessel or character that belongs within some jurisdiction, the moment you do that, you realize you don't have any. You're in a bind until you start to really slow down and go, wait a minute here. It's not about that. It's about whether I volunteer or not, because this is my time. See, I can volunteer my time in character, or I can recognize that it is my time that is not being volunteered. And the moment you recognize time as the commodity that you control, now the voluntary nature of your actions come into play, and now the 13th Amendment comes into play, where it says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. You can remove the involuntary servitude by saying, nah, you know what? My time is worth more than that taxpayer. My time is worth more than that defendant. It's worth more than that. And until you pay me to play, until you pay me for my time and character, by the way, the concept of subrogation has been coming up a lot. And when I put my time into a character over many years, let's say I put my time into Curtis Richard Kallenbach for 57 years, I actually have 57 years of time served equitably. So who has the greatest claim upon Curtis Richard Kallenbach that has ever existed? Me. So my time served could easily commute any sentence that they ever try to lay on me because of the 57 years I have time served. People got to realize time is the greatest claim they can ever make. Time.
Well, like I said, it doesn't exist without it. There's no, this is, and I'm really getting kind of having some revelations here, because now I'm starting to realize that the digital identity cannot be separate from the legal identity. There has to be one and the same.
No,
it?
It absolutely can't be. Again, they may be creating another dance floor, so to speak, or another plane of existence, but there's still one's tied to the other, which is tied to the other. They're all connected. They have to be, because they have to go all the way back to the source of their creation. And remember that Curtis Richard Kallenbach does not exist without me coming out of my mother's womb. So the source of everything is me.
So this is why we have what is called, what's it called, the dark net? Because
that's probably the best one. I don't know.
Well,
yeah, it might be the best one.
The black market of the internet, and the reason that, and I realize the reason they're calling that is because the people that are on there are not legally identified. They're in a digital identity that is separate from a legal identity. That's the difference between the black internet and the white, or the one that's controlled, if you will. That's the difference.
Yeah, the secret agency that they basically granted to all of us. The secret agent.
Right. That's actually really enlightening. No digital identity. There's no point to it unless it's attached to the legal identity. Without the legal side of it, the digital identity, nothing can be enforced in the digital realm.
And without the substantial side of it, the grounds upon which the legal identity is rooted, which is your property. See, that's people don't understand. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm just tripping out, because this is what we've been talking about. That means the AI, this digital realm that they're creating, it really is. It has to be the legal realm personified, anthropomorphized into something. I mean, that's freaking me out right now, because I'd always considered
it's a hall of mirrors. Yeah, it's a reflection of a reflection.
It's the legal beast coming to life, in life being fictional, but still it's coming to fruition. Just it's amazing to me.
Yeah,
scary.
I mean, it's fun though. See, again, I'm having a good time now, because everything is founded in reality. I mean, again, even the digital doesn't exist without the legal, which doesn't exist without the actual. And again, there's nothing of Curtis Richard Kallenbach exists without me being born. I am the source of everything. And so when you go to source, and of course that source, I'm only speaking of me. Let's do something fun here for a second, and learn the difference between, origins, source, and all that stuff, because people don't. The source of all man. I don't know. Let's just say, without any belief systems, I'll just say that man showed up on planet Earth physically. Let's say 100,000 years ago. I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out there so we have something to talk about. So man shows up. The first man that actually is relative to us. I'm not talking about everything. So man shows up 100,000 years ago. That's the source of man. Now the funny thing is that that's not the origin, because people don't. They got to really hear me on this. When I show up, I'm the source of my timeline or my life, but I'm only a point in time. Or when I arrive, it's an origin. There's a point of origin that is along a timeline. The source is the very beginning of everything. When I say everything, I'm talking about man. But then you can go beyond that source to the source of everything. And then the source of man becomes nothing but a point of origin within all source. So, it's Russian dolls, so to speak. And it keeps going ad infinitum, as big as it can get, all the way down to as small as it can get. And they're all different levels or planes of existence. And until we understand that we're dealing on such a small level, and we can't expand our minds because we're watching football today and drinking beer.
Yeah, but I think the reason why we're watching football and drinking beer, I think the reason we are so distracted is because we've actually been sort of tricked. We've been entrained almost to think that we know it all, that we've reached the age of know-it-allness, so we can just relax, go to Burning Man, do nothing at all, the computers will, right? The robots will do it for us. It's like we've lost our imaginations. We've lost our wonder. We've lost that the Bible talks about the mysteries and how man is not supposed to know certain things. We are not supposed to know what the hell is in space, for instance, the eternity that is that universe. We're not supposed to know these things. We're not supposed to know what makes the sun. We're not supposed to know what the center of the earth is. These are the beautiful mysteries of life, and it's wonderful to look at them and wonder about them. But it's another thing to say, well, I know that the center of the earth is a ball of core, and it turns and it spins, and I know that outer space contains this, and that dark matter exists, and that the Big Bang happened, and all of this this knowledge that can only be known by the full spectrum that we call God or whatever you call it, existence, right? We've been we've had that wonder stripped from us, and talk to any scientist who will say, we have to kill this life form in order to understand how it lives. Right? We have to kill it so we can deconstruct it and see how it lives. That makes a lot of sense, right? And yet the maxim of law in science is that you'll never understand source. You never will get to the source of life or anything else because you're not God. You're not the creator. We've been put into this sort of dead space, if you will, this virtual reality where we don't wonder about reality anymore. We just wonder about how we can alter it to our own ends, and that's a very dangerous place. That's the loss of, I think, spirituality, is when you stop wondering about nature and you start thinking you start abusing it and start creating your own reality. False reality.
It's so nice though, Clint, to just not worry about it. I like not knowing. I really enjoy it, and I also like not worrying about not knowing.
It's
so
beautiful.
It is, and here's the sad part. One of the toughest, saddest things that ever happened in my life was realizing, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but when my mother died in 2001, she was 63 years old, and I realized that I never knew her. For 63 years she was on this planet in reality, and I never knew her just as a woman, as a being. I only knew her as mom. I put her in so many bad positions as mom because I expected her to be my mom all her life. I never saw her just as another being, another woman. And only after she passed did I realize, man, she had all the worries and fears and everything that I have. She died at 63. I'm 57 now. She died in 2001. And the funny thing is that I didn't ever see her as anything other than mom. My sister passed away, my older sister, by the way, in 2007 at 47 years old. I'm now 57, 10 years older than she is. And I never knew my sister. Why? Because we were sold an idea that we will see these people later on in some sort of heaven. And so we don't have to worry about our time here on this planet. All we have to do is just go do our thing because we are already saved and we're going to see everybody we love in heaven. Bullshit. The only time we have in these bodies is right now. Look at your loved ones and realize this is the only time you have. I mean, even if I meet my mother somewhere, it's not going to be my mom. It's going to be some other being. I don't know what it's going to be, but I tell you what, it's not going to be my mom. And the problem is that we let go of our entire lives. We let everybody pass, and we don't even know who they are because we're so caught up in something happening after we die. It disgusts me to no end.
That's amazing to me because the Bible says nothing about that. This has been perpetrated by the Puritans and these people who it was a cult. It was a cult that formed into a church, and their whole belief structure was based on that fact that everything we do in this life is only to serve us in the next life. And that's why you had this anarchist sort of movement. You had this movement of do everything in this life to appease yourself in the next. It was a really, really strange sort of movement that got turned in and mixed up with the natural law, et cetera, et cetera. And now there's this sort of mix of those two things. And that's what became sort of religion, is this notion that the Bible says something other than it does. Why do you, I mean, what purpose is the Bible going to serve you in some other life when the Bible is the law of the nature of this life? What sense does that make in any way, shape, or form to consider that just believing in something and you're going to go to some other? Why would you create this entire book of law? Why would you create this entire structure built on the law and laws of nature of this world if all that matters is the next? This doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form.
Well, if it's true, you just shoot yourself in the head and get this one over with.
Right.
You
can't
do that because I'm sorry, but that's self-destruction, which is known as suicide.
Yep.
And so self-destruction. By the way, it is self-destruction. When I take on the character Curtis Richard Kallenbach, it is self-destruction. I have executed myself. I'm missing now. I'm gone. In fact, even legally, they consider me missing, presumed dead, because the character that the fiction has no life to it.
Well,
it is self-destruction to take on that character.
You do this a spiel. It's the difference between, I and me and myself, that kind of thing.
This is one of my favorite ways, to explain I won't say the Trinity, but I just did. But the concept, there's a legal term, by the way, because it's called breaking bulk. Breaking bulk. In other words, things need to be bound, i.e. bond. They need to be bound together. Now, here's what's interesting. When you're standing before a mirror, the image in the mirror, so you got to think of the concept of me, myself, and I. Those three things need to be bound together, all in one time, all in the same place. Time and space have to correlate. You've got to be it's called the present, by the way. Me, myself, and I, all in the present moment. Time and space, one place. Here we go. So I go and I stand before this mirror. The image in the mirror, the reflection, is myself. In other words, it's me. It's the image of me. It's my conscious ego idea of what I'm seeing or what I think other people see. So the image actually is the me. Me, 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 me. It's all about me. That's the ego, and that's the image.
It's also a reverse image. It's like the opposite image, right? So yeah.
Well, and that's even worse, is that people don't understand the image in the mirror isn't a reflection of you. It's actually a counter you.
Like
it's
an
the
ego,
opposite. It's not, if I stand in the mirror with a hammer in my right hand, the thing looking back at me has the hammer in its left hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not me at all. It's a reversal of me. It's the reverse of me. But so anyway, me is that thing. It's the image, or what I believe to be what other people perceive me to be. So me is the reflection. The myself is the substance being reflected. So it's actually the physical being, or the instrument of God, so to speak, the substance that is being reflected. It's the man that's standing before the mirror is myself. It's property. That actually is my property, by the way. Myself is my property. But here's the crazy thing, is that me, myself, now I am the consciousness, or the self-evident awareness looking through the eyes at the reflection that's reflecting the substance, which is myself. So my consciousness is the I, looking through the eyes of the myself at the me. So when people understand that you have to have, I think of it this way too, is that the me, myself, and I are kind of like, to keep those things all bundled together, all in the same moment, is if all of a sudden I put my ego into another character that travels into another jurisdiction, I have just broken that bulk, that thing that needs to stay together. And my mind now is in a character that belongs in another jurisdiction. I've lost my mind. I've lost my head. And the head is the capital, so I've lost my capital. And that's what people don't realize, is that if your mind is in another character, me, myself, and I are not in the same place in the same time.
Well,
so that's a very important thing for people to understand.
And to clarify, you're basically saying that what you just explained is I, me, and myself are properties of the same thing. In other words, you're to have control of those three things at all times. The second that you allow, just like oxygen is a property of water, the second you take away the oxygen, what do you have left? H2. Okay, so you have a gas now, right? So you have to maintain control of those properties. And this is why I say, when I say that your children are your only real, true property, I don't mean property in the legal sense, because the reason that your children are property of the legal system because of the birth certificate and everything else is because you allowed this trinity. You've allowed your child's rights and property to become something fictional instead of something real. So you have to always maintain a grasp on that trinity, that mind, body, and soul, that concept, so that one of those things doesn't go and be influenced by something else or even controlled by something else. And that, I think, is what you're trying to say, is that to keep the entirety of self, me, myself, and I, as one,
in the
present, and never apart. In other words, those three properties are never separated and turned into the property of another.
In 1542, I think, Ignatius Loyola, the one that began the Jesuits, he came up with an idea that the entire planet could be controlled if they could capture the soul of man. They've done it. Here's how they did it, is remember that me, myself, and I, the I looking through the eyes at the reflection back, which is reflecting the myself, that I is the spirit, is my spirit. If my spirit leaves my body, what does that leave me with? What is a body without a spirit called?
A corpse.
Yeah, corpse. It's dead. And what's funny is that the Jesuits have a term for that, where these corpses or these cadavers are out there doing things without spirit, and it's called what is it? Cinde a cadaver, or what is it? It's basically in the manner of a corpse is how it is. Anyway,
Yeah.
so when they remove the spirit from the body, in other words, when my mind, when my spirit goes somewhere else, if I put my spirit and energy into another character, then this body, this gift from God, so to speak, has basically dropped to the ground. It is an empty suit, so to speak. This one it dies. So now I've died by putting myself into another character, or my spirit into another character. I'm gone. I'm sorry, I just said it. What's a spirit without a body? a ghost.
Mhm.
So what they've done is by separating the spirit, I'm talking about on paper now, maybe with just a birth certificate. When you claim that other thing, you're separating, and I like to call it church and state, the separation of church and state, because the state of mind is a state of mind, and the church is the temple or the body itself. So when you believe it's okay to separate the church and the state, the mind from body, or the spirit from the body, they got you. And again, all these different things fit in. It's not any one thing. So when people start to try to do one thing and not realize that, there's a cause and effect, and even the effect is a cause, you better just slow down and go and try to find the source of it, the very root of the problem. And the root of the problem is always going to come back to what I've found myself is going to be a property claim, a legitimate property claim. And really what I've found, even on a spiritual level, is my spirit in this body, in this realm, in this time, which is the present. So again, it all comes down to the time while I'm here now. And that time is my time in this body, and I get to choose the characters that I wear, and I can either call it voluntary on one end, but when I don't want to wear the clothing or the suit of that character, I have to make it clear this is not voluntary. And that's where equity comes into this equation, is remember that even if I didn't know about Curtis Richard Kallenbach being the creation of somebody else or the composition of somebody else, but I've worn that character for 57 years, I actually have an adverse possession right to that character. And over 57 years, I have time served as my equity. So I can actually take their property, what they created after 57 years, and have total claim upon it through adverse possession, if I understand equity and if I understand time. So what was not mine is going to be mine. Now think about all the stuff, all the property you earn through their character. Now you have a claim to everything earned through that character. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can
Through that character, everything through that. In other words, the trust that character establishes. Now everything that I've ever earned through Curtis Richard Kallenbach or the legal name or whatever now is under my control because I have an adverse right to it after 57 years.
The problem I have with this, I mean, there's a lot of gurus, a lot of movements out there who have people chasing the rainbow, chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That there's this trust account that you can access.
Be careful because remember, in nature, everything at the end of the day is zero.
Sure.
So when everything is equaled or zeroed out, when I finally have access to everything that's happened in the past, all it does is lead me to zero. There isn't anything extra.
Boy, well, that's forgiveness. Yeah.
It's forgiveness. So everything's been forgiven.
The problem that I think people aren't seeing is that if you find that money, if pretending that this money exists, and I'm telling people, no, stop following these people. There is no rainbow. It's an optical illusion, and you certainly will not find the end of the illusion. You just can't go there. The place doesn't exist, right? The rainbow doesn't actually. It's an optical illusion. So there's no gold, in other words. And if there is, it can't be found in the sense that you're looking. So the dangerous part of all of this is that. And what people don't realize is that, finding such a treasure would be basically you're finding it in on the ship of another. You're You're a rented vessel. The only thing that a treasure hunt will yield is something that is owned by another, which all money is owned by government. So you're only finding something that's going to keep you in the system and subject to its laws if you ever do find whatever it is these people are saying you can find. And what I like about what you're saying is that no, once you get there, again, it's anticlimactic. There is no monetary reward per se. There's just the truth. There's just life itself. And that's what I keep trying. That's why I say it's really hard to sell, because there's not this reward, a physical, or I should say a secular reward. You know, that it's different than that. It's a spiritual reward that can't be explained until you really, really get there, right?
I think it's a beautiful way to look at it when you realize that that world is obviously complete fiction, and the easiest way again to take this incredibly difficult concept and make it simple for people is that the game, let's call it Monopoly again, when you have all this Monopoly money in front of you, and when you end your play in the game, do you put that money in your wallet? Is there anything you actually get from the game? No, it all goes back in the box, and at the end of it, you walk away to your dinner with your friends, or a decent craft beer or whatever. But the Monopoly game itself is forgotten. I don't care how much of the board you earned or how much of it you owned. You don't get to take any of it with you. So when you find out the truth of the matter and you get to that place, you go, holy cow, this has been nothing but a game. And I wish I would have known it was a game earlier, because I wouldn't have been so afraid. Yeah. So that's what's going to happen is once we eliminate the fear by understanding how or what the mechanisms or the leverage, the system of leverage they have, when we realize that we actually have all the power, but we give it away through our love for each other. We give it away because they tell us that we're helping the guys in Africa and South Africa. We're helping the guys, in the poor states, the poor countries, third world. We don't realize that they're using that against us, because the so-called representatives are now allocating all of our voluntary natures to whatever means they want. And the problem is they're not. Our best interest is not in this thing. We're the only. By the way, Clint, and this sounds horrible, but who's the only one, realistically, that has an interest in your life?
The only one?
Yeah, the only one. And don't tell me your son or your daughter, your husband, your wife, whatever. The only one that actually has a legitimate interest.
My dog.
Well, of course, if all of a sudden he can't get out of the house and you drop dead today, he's in trouble.
That's right. He's like, I really got to pee.
Yeah, well, you're not going to care how much urine's around that house eventually, but the point is that we don't realize it, but we've been misled even on the concept of the word selfish. I mean, the only one that has any true responsibility for his existence, his or her existence, is you. Or is I? And I can't. I mean, my favorite saying that I somehow come up with years ago is the greatest gift that I can give to you, Clint, is to remove the burden of my life from your shoulders. That's the greatest gift I can give you, is recognize my life as being mine and my responsibility, and then doing everything for me, removing the burden of my life from you. And see, if everybody understood that's the greatest gift you can give everybody, then all of a sudden I'm going to have enough, more than enough, and by the way, my wife and I do this all the time, but we give all kinds of stuff away because we can, not because it's taken from us and given through some other, church or organization that is pretending to be, so whatever. I can't stand the thought of I can't send my own kids to college because all the money that gets stolen from me, but other people's kids are going to college on my dime. So, I mean, the idea is that the greatest gift I can truly give you is to remove the burden of my life from your shoulders. And that's communism is where we're stuck. We're stuck in communism now, and we have been since 1933. But the point is that I'm the only one responsible for my life. And that sooner everybody understands that really nobody cares about you. No offense I'm only worried about whether I eat tomorrow, not whether you do, because if I'm dead, I can't even help you. So I need to take care of myself.
That's the real point. If you don't love yourself, you can't love someone else. And if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't exist, then you can't help anybody else. That's the real point. And you find in that notion of selfishness, in the real sense of the word, it's not a bad thing if it's of, as you say, the negative law, the natural law, the law of nature, where again, you should never be wealthy until all others are. You forgive all transgressions, etc., etc. Judge not, yes, lest ye be judged. All these different things are included in that type of thinking, because really, at the same time you're saying lift all your burdens, at the same time you should be following the law of charity, which says, hey, I will gladly accept your burdens if it helps you remove them. So you're sort of in a dualistic concept there, where you don't want to burden somebody, but at the same time you're supposed to be there for other people's burdens.
Well, the beauty about the biblical concept of love thy neighbor as thyself automatically precludes that you love yourself first. The neat thing about it, though, is when I learned how important my life was to me, I automatically knew how important your life was to you.
Mm.
Now I have an automatic connection with you. It's going, well, if I love my life this much, then Clint must love his life. So I got to treat him as I would want to be treated myself. It's very circular, but it's the most beautiful thing in the world to recognize the idea that, listen, when I'm actually happy with the man in the mirror and go, wow, I love this existence, and then I look at you with the same wonder going, well, he's got to love this existence, and so why in the world would I harm him? Why would I steal his shit? Because, he's just like me. Black, white, Chinese, doesn't matter. He's just like me. Fucking unbelievable, man.
Well, so essentially what I've come to sort of uncover is this word husbandry, and I never really understood what husbandry was until I saw a few quotes. We talk about husband and wife, we talk about husbandry over animals and stuff and over land, but I don't think people really have a husbandman is a farmer, a cultivator, which is where the farmer comes from, husbandman, basically. And when you think of husbandry, you think of this, you must think of it past the marriage aspect or the legal aspect of the marriage, and think of it as much more. Husbandry is actually defined as agriculture or cultivation of the soil. Okay, this is nothing to do with marriage. Husband and wife is a domestic relationship, but some of these quotes that I found really, really enlightened me as to what the problem is. And of course, the problem is property. Property, again, there's two versions of property. One is to be a property of something, like oxygen to water, and then there's the legal title to something that says, okay, you have power over that thing, you can treat it as you wish legally against the law of nature. You can treat that piece of nature and pollute it and do everything you want to. And this is the difference between owning land and having the land own you, or husbandry. To be married to the land is as it's a part of you, as if your blood and its blood, or its dirt, if you will, its oil, flows together with your blood. This is from Wendell Berry on farming and food. He says, to husband is to use with care, to keep, to save, to make last, to conserve. Old usage tells us that there is husbandry also of the land, of the soil, of the domestic plants and animals, obviously because of the importance of these things to the household. And there have been times, one of which is now, when some people have tried to practice a proper human husbandry of the non-domestic creatures in recognition of the dependence of our households and domestic life upon the wild world. Husbandry is the name of all practices that sustain life by connecting us conservingly to our places and our world. It is the art of keeping tied all the strands in the living network that sustains us. And so it appears that most and perhaps all of industrial agriculture's manifest failures are the result of an attempt to make the land produce without husbandry. What is our problem? Our main problem is that we are not connected to what I call God, which is the land, the nature. We're not practicing husbandry. We're practicing domination. We're practicing something other than that. So this is what I mean between the two different types of property. The fact that we've been tricked into considering our children as a legal property is why we've lost control of the generations and why we're ending up where we're at, because we don't consider them as just one of the property of our blood runs through our children. The property of our lives, our DNA, and the memory of the genetic code runs through that's the property that I refer to. And instead, that beautiful concept was turned into the fictional evil concept of real property. Real as in real estate. Real does not mean real in the legal language. And so our problem is that we are not practicing husbandry towards anything at all. Not our wives, not our children, not our land, not our homes, not our domestic animals, our very food supply, which we feed the cancer of all the other animals, right? We have been lost to this concept of husbandry. And I think that is, instead, we're married to the state. We're married to our status, our legal persona, the mask that we wear in the Latin. Right? We're married to fiction instead of nature, and that's the problem.
Okay. Are you ready? That's unbelievable, but because I completely agree. And here's what's so weird about when I heard you say husbandry, I'm thinking nobody talks about this stuff. Years ago, and only recently, my wife and I went to a concert again. But years ago, I was joking about the State Farm and all that stuff, the insurance, because this whole world is based on insurance, by the way. But what's interesting is that last year, about a year and a half ago, my wife and I went to a Jethro Tull concert. And believe it or not, this particular tour that he was doing was based upon the name of the band and the man Jethro Tull. And Jethro Tull, historically, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Jethro Tull, believe it or not, was an agricultural inventor, and he was one of the first British guys that brought about what's called the British Agricultural Revolution. Now, the acronym for that is what? Let me say it again. British Agricultural Revolution. BAR. The Bar Association is not this thing that you've heard it. The Bar Association is a group of men that their entire being is to work upon land and livestock. That's the Bar Association. They're dealing with land and livestock. That's all they deal with. And so when you start to dig around and look into what the bar actually is, it's land and livestock, and that's what they're dealing with in the courts. And that's why when you started talking to me, or when you started saying the word agriculture and husbandry or husband, people don't realize who the husband is. And the fact that the United States has two positions on the concept of land or blood. And in fact, the United States is one of the few countries that actually has both the concept of jus soli and jus sanguinis. Jus soli meaning of the land or soil, and jus sanguinis of the blood. So what they've done is they've split both the bloodline and being born on the land. They've made two different positions there. One is agricultural, or the husband side of it, and the other is bloodline. So they've made it impossible for you to, in fact, it's called diversity of citizenship, but they've made it impossible for anybody to bring these two positions together until they understand that you cannot separate where you're born, the soil upon which I was born, from the bloodline of my father, because that's really what they're looking at, is the bloodline of dad. But so this is where the split comes in, and this is why I say it's so important to understand what happens at the hospital. When baby comes out baby's born, let's just say, in a hospital that's physically located, in my case, on Winnebago County, which happens to be in the state of Illinois, or Illinois State, which happens to be part of the Republic, i.e. the 50-state union. That's Illinois. And that's the soil upon which I came out of mother. And there's actually a document that evidences that happening. The problem is that the other material that come out after me, let's just say it falls to the ground or goes unclaimed and then considered abandoned. This is where it gets interesting, because that property falls to the ground, metaphorically, and it falls to the ground of the county or the township or whatever, and it's picked up through eminent domain. So the property left behind, the DNA left behind, is now part of a different system. It falls to the soil. And once it falls to the soil, it's picked up through eminent domain, and there's a legal case called Haslam versus Lockwood. And and this is, by the way, this case came about in 1870, the very same year the District of Columbia was created. So Haslam versus Lockwood is about waste material left behind on public lands. So, and who has a right to make the claim and things like that. If you don't lay claim to your property that was left behind in the hospital, it falls to a different jurisdiction. It literally falls to the ground, and upon the falling on the ground, it's subject to a different set of laws. So again, this whole system is based upon the idea of abandonment of your property, picked up through, by the way, it can only be picked up through eminent domain by condemnation. It's condemned. It's condemned property. Just like when you're, God damn it, when something is damned. It's damned because you didn't think it worthy enough to pick up. So in other words, that brother, sibling, sister, whatever you want to call that material that they call born alive that comes out of mother's womb after baby, that actually is a citizen or a subject to another dominion, another land. And again, people don't understand how important Haslam versus Lockwood is. Haslam versus Lockwood explains exactly why there's diversity of citizenship in the United States of America. It explains it, because where that waste material lands is claimed by a specific government, whether it's township, and if the township claims it, they do a governmental survey, and through the Bureau of Land Management, it's picked up, and now the Bureau of Land Management hands it to the United States Treasury. So your DNA now is part of the ground from the township, the government survey, and hand it to the Treasury. It's not your DNA that they're grabbing. They're saying that your waste material fell on ground that belonged to the township or county or whoever. They're not claiming you, they're claiming the waste material that was abandoned. And that's why people are so confused about this, because they can't claim you, but they can certainly claim the waste material that needs to be what? Picked up. Actually, in Illinois or in Rockford, they have something called a reclamation, Rockford Reclamation. And so they're reclaiming reclamation. The reclamation service comes in and it cleans up the mess that was left behind. And of course, whatever costs were incurred to clean up the waste material, obviously now there's a lien on whoever owns that property. It's like me leaving an old jalopy in your front yard and you're screaming saying, "Kurt, you got to get your junk out of my yard, otherwise, I'm going to put a lien on it." Well, that's exactly what's happened. The original lien to our lives comes through Haslam versus Lockwood. And until people understand this is all machination, this is all mechanistic, it's not something magical. It's very real, to use a term the way I mean it. So, again, it is all about property and whether it's abandoned or not. And here's one last thing I'll say about that, and then we can go any other direction. But people don't understand that the man that's speaking right now on the phone, have I ever abandoned anything back at the hospital? No, because I'm still using it 57 years later. The moment they know I'm alive, all of their frozen claims, frozen assets 57 years ago. Remember, I went missing, presumed dead. The moment I'm found alive is the moment that trust collapses. And the only way it collapses is if I make a claim upon what is lawfully mine, which is everything that came out of mother other than mother's maternal afterbirth material. So, again, that's how weird this is. This is about property, but it's not about mine. It's about the waste that falls to the ground on state property or county property as waste material.
Well, I listened to that, and I get I get the picture of what you're saying. It sounds to me like that should be taken as a metaphor more than anything. But I either way, you have to know the literal to understand the metaphor. But that is a way of explaining all of this. That is an interesting way of looking at it. What's the court case again?
Haslem, that's Haslem v. Lockwood. And
interesting. So the word,
it's the horse poop. Yeah, and it only happens through abandonment. Only when the horse poop is abandoned does the horse poop become subject to all these erroneous claims.
It becomes treasure found. It's
treasure trove. It's treasure trove. It's absolutely treasure trove.
And we call the United States around here, we call it a big pirate cove. So it's not, that wouldn't be, that's what it is after all. You're talking about, which is interesting because that comes from, the afterbirth. The concept of afterbirth is actually called secundines. So like secondary. And it's the membranes.
You mean the second coming? Sorry.
Well, if you look at other words that begin with the word, secu, you find secular, for instance. So to secularize. So you're talking about the membranes that the fetus is wrapped in the womb, the afterbirth is what they call it. And you look and you see secure, you see secularize. And you see pretty much nothing else.
Yep. Section.
Well, you don't see the secu, and I'm curious if I were to follow the word secu, what that would uncover, or secun, or whatever it is. But you only find it in secular and secure, and that's about it. There's no other words that we use that are like that. So to secularize or to secure sounds about right? You're securing a deed, essentially. You're making a person. You're seizing a found property, foundling. So it actually does kind of make sense when you start breaking down the word.
And it's kind of fun though when you understand that the afterbirth itself is called a birthday cake. So the placenta is actually called a cake. So this birthday cake, by the way, only has two elements in it. You were talking about something that makes up something or is a part of something else. The birthday cake, i.e. the placenta, has two elements. And those two elements are maternal material or maternal afterbirth and fetal afterbirth. In other words, it has your DNA and mother's DNA bound together. And so you got one cake with two claimants. And the really funny thing is a few years back, some friends of mine in Ohio got somebody at the county level to acknowledge that all birth certificated persons are female. Now think about that, because they're saying that the placenta or the maternal is the only thing left behind, but there isn't. It's yours too. So if you don't lay claim to that happening or that event, then remember there are two potential claimants, you and mom, and if somebody else is acting on the behalf of mother's lineage, I call it the mitochondrial DNA, or the mom's lineage, the female lineage, which is the Roman Catholic Church, by the way. There's already been somebody that has acknowledged that Curtis Richard Kallenbach is female. So every birth certificated person in America is only identified by the female or the maternal afterbirth tissue. So there are no males in America. There's only females. And if you think about that concept just for a moment, you'll realize that that emasculates, or it makes it so there's no inheritable property in America.
Right. So in other words, we're like in grammar, you have the feminine and the masculine. The masculine is always more powerful than the feminine. Of course, you have the sexists out there who will take that in the completely, illogical, emotional way. That's not what's meant. It's just that it's always been known in grammar that the feminine is inferior to the masculine. It's a very important part of grammar, and I think that's why they're changing all the words now, so that there is no masculine or feminine in any of our language anymore, so that we can't even another way of emasculating us, emasculating our very ability to communicate authority. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to watch. It is
legal castration too, though. It's a legal castration where males have no right or authority over their own families. And again, that if I lay claim to Curtis Richard Kallenbach as me, then I become the female side of the equation, and I have no inheritable egg stem considered a bastard.
So how does this go into your the concept of an alternative timeline? You know, it's just Anno Domini versus their Anno Mundi or whatever. Because now again, here I'm pulling up the word secular. Comes from secularis or seculum, which means the world or an age. Well, of course, we're in a separate age, a separate sort of self-contained commercial age that's been created from the year zero, i.e. the year of the Lord, whatever that means, the year of the Pope, because we always have some Lord, don't we, that's not that's some replacement of Christ or replacement of God. That's what the king is, that's what the Pope is. So how does this, I'm saying this actually fits into what you're saying, because you're secularizing the quote-unquote afterbirth. You're secularizing the feminine, is what you're saying.
And what's interesting about 1582 is when Pope Gregory wanted a second or an additional calendar, the Western Catholicism in Rome, as opposed to, I think it was Constantinople. Constantinople was the Roman capital, but they adhered to what's known as Orthodox Catholicism, where the Western Roman Catholicism became the Anno Domini calendar. They have two different calendars within the Roman world, and they are 13 days apart. So think about that. In Roman Catholicism, there are two calendars, and the two calendars have a separation of 13 days. One is the commercial version, and that is the Gregorian, and one is the I just said it. It's Orthodox, and I call the Anno Domini Gregorian calendar, which is the same, commerce, because that's the one that's used in global commerce. But the Orthodox calendar is also Catholic, and that's the Julian calendar, and they're 13 days apart. Yeah. Let me say something. I'm not going to go into the Anno Mundi yet. Let me finish this thought, because this is where it gets crazy. So if I have a split between Orthodox and commerce, commerce is Gregorian, Orthodox is Julian. I have a commercial calendar and an Orthodox calendar. One I call the God calendar, or the reality calendar, and one is used specifically for commerce. And if you look up Gregorian, it's a commercial calendar used globally. So they're 13 days apart. One interesting side note on this is that they were still using the Julian calendar globally, and in 1776, or actually around 1773, I think, America was still using the Julian calendar. Thomas Jefferson said, under no circumstances on my tombstone are you going to say I was born to the Gregorian Anno Domini calendar. He wouldn't even allow it. So these are guys that knew the difference between a commercial existence and reality. And to claim the lineage of the character born to the Gregorian, which if it says AD, that's a Gregorian Anno Domini calendar. That's pure commerce. Pure commerce.
Which is another word for secular.
Exactly. But here's what's fun, is I have a very good friend that was born in the canon law-based Puerto Rico. In other words, it's still under canon law of Rome. And through the, Spain and Portugal and what's called the Ark. What is it called? Anyway, I'll think of it in a second. He has two birth certificates, and I'm not kidding. I long before I ever met him, I was on this 13-day differential. And when I finally met Jerry, he said, "Kurt, you're not going to believe it." I said, "What?" He goes, "I got two birth certificates." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yep. Same birth, same boy, same baby, two different dates. He has two birth certificates, one Anno Domini, or Gregorian, and one Julian. He has two birth certificates 13 days apart."
Huh.
What does that tell you? And here's what's funny is that the Julian calendar is the living man calendar, the Orthodox. And the Anno Domini Gregorian calendar is commerce. And it's the difference of 13 days that I've found over everything I've ever looked at, which is the interest being charged. In other words, if I'm using the 13-day in advance Gregorian Anno Domini, I'm using something 13 days before I have a right to it. Is that not a loan?
So
Am I not being...
We are living in their history?
Yeah, the living man is historical, or let's even call it the present. But their birth record, their commercial vote, is 13 days in advance. So we're being extended credit by 13 days.
Gotcha.
That's the margin that the banks are using, those 13 days. By the way, if you knew what somebody was going to do 13 days in advance, would you not have an advantage?
Sure.
Would that not be a trade secret that maybe you want to keep to yourself?
What it sounds like you're talking about with the afterbirth concept is the notion of a hostage. A hostage is defined as a person delivered to an enemy or a hostile power as a pledge to secure the performance or the conditions of a treaty or stipulations, i.e. a contract of any kind, and on the performance of which the person is to be released.
Wasn't Jesus executed in advance for everybody?
Right. So
I'm just throwing that out because I believe that there is that. I believe they're using that Gregorian Anno Domini as a certificate of indulgence born to that system.
Right.
To the idea of sacrifice.
We've got just a little less than 10 minutes right now. I want you to tell people about your site, what you're offering there, some of your seminars, and if you would, what is at least in your purview? I'd prefer that you say it in the purview of the state, or the federal government or whatever, or your Illinois or whatever state you're in. What is your current status as the state recognizes, not as you think it is, but as the state recognizes it?
There was a day a few years ago when I walked into the county recorder's office, and the recorder herself came out for no reason, after something I'd recorded. I won't say what it was, but after something I recorded earlier, a month or so earlier, and she came out of her office only with the intent to say, "Hi, Kurt." I mean, she came out of her office to specifically say, actually she said Curtis. "Hi, Curtis." Think about that. So the county recognizes me as something other than Mr. Kallenbach or Curtis Richard Kallenbach. I did something even a couple of years ago where the county recognizes me as being in a different position. So that's that. I don't know how to answer the state level, but some interesting things have happened over the years with my son and what have you. But as far as what I'm working on or what I'm doing now, I know that I've done enough to situate the living man, i.e. the one that's speaking right now, really knowing his position. The thing I'm doing now is I'm taking control, full control, through equity, an equitable claim, and that would be time served or even the biology that was left behind. I'm taking control of that vessel, i.e. I'm going to use the word surrogate because that's the word they use. Now let me read one thing, and this is where I'm going. I'm writing a document right now that gives me total control over the surrogate, in other words, the commercial vessel, and in any time that anything ever happens that is involving that vessel, i.e. surrogate, or idol, if you want to use that word, I have control. I'm the first one they talk to. I'm the only one they'll ever speak to about that surrogate. Listen to this. This, by the way, is verbatim out of the Uniform Power of Attorney Act. Verbatim. And this is, remember that in their system, you need to have a voice. You need to have a conduit through which they can hear you. And you can't do it as a man. You got to do it through a character. And the power of attorney, there's a difference between agency, power of attorney, and all that stuff. This is specific to something called an attorney in fact. It's very specific. It is not agency. It's an attorney in fact. So I'm working specifically with writing a letter that is giving the power when an incapacity arises. In other words, the death or whatever of the principal. So here's what it says. This is, by the way, something they wrote. This is not my words. It says, the primary purpose of the Uniform Durable Power of Attorney Act was to provide individuals with an inexpensive, non-judicial method of surrogate property management in the event of later incapacity. Now, here's what's crazy, is that vessel, that Curtis Richard Kallenbach, all caps, is the surrogate. Absolutely 100%. Here's what it also says. It says, the success of the Uniform Durable Power of Attorney Act is evidenced by the widespread use of durable powers in every jurisdiction. It doesn't leave anything out. It wants to gain the power over this vessel, this surrogate. You now control everything, every movement on the monopoly board. Nobody can get past you without going through the attorney in fact. This is not agency. This is beyond agency. So I'm writing it right now to where I capture all the authority ab initio, or from the beginning.
Well, you can't. So let me ask you this, just to clarify, because you can't become higher than your principal. You can't become higher than the creator of the person, right? So you're still subordinate to
no,
power.
because that the reason is I have. Because of that equitable claim over 57 years of time served, I have an adverse possession claim, meaning that whatever land they thought, whatever grant they thought, I now have total control even beyond that of the creator. If I bought a piece of land and I didn't mow the yard of the grass on the other side of the wall, or on the other side of the creek, if I didn't do anything for 10 years and that guy over on the other side of the wall or the creek has been taking care of it, in court they will award that piece of my property to that man after 10 years. And I don't ever get to speak about it again. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to adverse possession. I've had this property now for 57 years. I've been using it and putting all my time into it for 57 years. I have time served and all the equity in this character. I'm going to gain control of it through an attorney-in-fact positioning. Not me. This has nothing to do with me. This only has to do with the surrogate. And until people understand that it's the surrogate they're having problems with.
Okay, well, here's the problem. Here's the problem I have with this. Again, you have to recognize. I mean, that thing that you're talking about only exists in their jurisdiction. You can't use it anywhere else. So you have to.
I'm good. I'm good with that.
You're still under that authority. You're still under that system. But
I control it. This is the first time where I can say no, thank you, not interested. They can't force. Well, remember that right now, because you've abandoned that vessel, you've abandoned the surrogate, you've abandoned it. Now the bar association or whoever else wants to come in and rule over it without your voice. All I'm doing is putting myself in a position to stop things from happening or not using it at all, but I have the control or the power over it to do so. People don't realize that, again, it's back to in the world but not of the world. I know the difference, and I know that I don't have to, I can say I'd rather not play tonight instead of having somebody knock on my door saying, oh, by the way, there's a warrant out for your arrest. No, there isn't. Because I didn't agree to the terms of whatever it is you guys. Remember, these guys are acting in a trustee or fiduciary capacity over property that's been abandoned. And that's what they're doing. They're only using it against you because you've abandoned. They created a vessel for you to use in commerce, but everybody has abandoned their position to it. It doesn't. So we don't get to argue whether it exists or not. That's the problem. We don't get to say, I don't want to play. I'm sorry, Kurt, but there's already a vessel in play in your name with a deposit on your behalf in the game. So either you let us play for you, or you take control of it. There's no way to say no, thank you at this point.
Okay, so
It's
on your website, tell people your website again.
Well, yeah, CurtisRichardKallenbach.xyz, and next month I am going to offer a private class for about 10 people and everybody else that's ever done anything. It's a one-time payment deal for everybody. But so next month, probably first or second week of February, I'm going to be bringing out this attorney-in-fact appointment. But I'm going to be teaching everything about it that leads up to it. It's not just going to be this document. It's going to be how it's all connected, kind of like this conversation tonight in a one-week class. So that's what I'll be doing in February. XYZ, you did want to say something real quick about XYZ, is that not true?
Yeah, go ahead.
XYZ is an interesting idea because when I discovered that The flat Earth, as I see it, is nothing but the paper realm, the paper world. And when people start reading about flat Earth, they're going to realize that this stuff is not new. It's old, and it's not about the physical world that we think it is. The idea of flat world or flat Earth has been around, and they've been joking about it because it's the paper realm. It's where it's the XY-axis.
Oh,
Let's find a point.
well, that brings us to the end. That's okay. Thanks, folks. That was Richard Kellenbach joining us. Talking about XYZ being paper realm, not the real world.
We can change it anytime we want.
Next week's
Only
Patrick
the
Short.
choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride.